sugar canes with my proletariat brothers in the fields of Cuba. And there I learned a lot too. I learned that you can't believe everything that people say, that yes, indeed, I would say that the life of the average Cuban was improved by the revolution. But when you juxtapose some of the prices and things of that nature, it's quite interesting. And I realize that I can't believe everything that my government tells me, and I can't believe everything that other governments tell me. That I have to kind of look at it and deal with it. So after getting this tongue-lashing via long distance from my father about what a disappointment I was going off to Cuba and explaining that he wasn't going to give me any money, he wasn't going to send me any money, and he wasn't going to let me talk to my mother, which would have been a soft touch. I would have got money. And he hung up on me. I stayed for about 5 months in Cuba. I returned to the United States via Canada, had my passport snatched by the FBI, had the FBI to go knocking on the doors of my neighborhood doing what we call red baiting, and wanted to know, asking my neighbors if they'd seen any hammer and sickle insignias around my house, if my father attended any Communist meetings, and that really annoyed my father because he was a supervisor at the post office. As I said before, being an ex-military man, he didn't like that at all. But nevertheless, to his credit, he stood by his son. He's not alive today, but I can remember that despite all of this yelling and shouting and expressions of disappointment, he stood by his son. And I can remember that our neighbors and his fellow co-workers stood by them when the FBI tried to do this red baiting aspect. So then I realized maybe if I really wanted justice, what I could really do was just the opposite of being a progressive and a leftist and a person who leaned towards socialist principles. The next thing I could do was be a capitalist. Because if I become rich, I could build nice, wonderful centers dedicated to understanding, to justice. I could do so much, but all I needed was some money. And so in my poor little young confused mind, I entered into the rock and roll business. Incidentally, my academic background was music and music education, and I play about 9 different instruments. So I figured if I can play with a band, I could probably manage a band. And then I decided I would go and try my hands at marketing, and I got a job at RCA Records in New York City. And all of a sudden, I was in the rock and roll business. I would actually do concerts all over the United States at various different coliseums. And I had what the young people call the bling bling. I was living large, having dinner with Stevie Wonder, Mick Jagger and the Stones, working with the OJs, Gladys Knight and the Pips, all the old school hip hop artists, Curtis Blow, Grandmaster Flash. Oh boy, was I rolling. At 22 years old, I had an awful lot of money, and I had picked up an awful lot of bad habits in the process. And therefore, I continued to do this, and I continued to tell myself that, sooner or later I'm going to break out of this, I'm going to give it all, and I'm going to become a person who's going to work for justice. I'm going to take all this money and do justice work. Well, I deceived myself, and I'm fine, thank you. And so, in the process of deceiving myself, I also did a lot of both I would call spiritual and psychological damage to myself. I found myself drifting further and further away from anything that even remotely looked like justice. I was a hedonistic entrepreneur. All I wanted was more money, more drinks, more drugs, you name it, I wanted it. And right around age 27, and I'll spare you the math, I'm 57. But right around age 27, I had just had a blues festival in Virginia Beach featuring B.B. King, the legendary blues artist. Had a big party, you know, one of those artist parties, everybody's, you know, running around doing whatever, you know, it feels good doing. And let me just start. In between that time, I had, in '68, as a freshman at Florida A&M, I met a Pakistani student from FSU University. And he gave me a copy of the Quran, the sacred scripture of Muslims. And because I had come from a theological family, I had read the Quran before. I read most of all of the sacred texts. But this one was fascinating because it was in Arabic. It had Arabic script. And I was just delighted and looking as there was something very, you know, enticing about the Arabic script. It looked oriental. And so I was given to it by a Pakistani student in '68, and he told me, he said, look, keep this book, keep it in a clean place, read it, it can help you. That's all he said. He didn't say any more. And so therefore I kept basically 3 books that I would love to read, and the 3 books that I kept was the Quran, Mao Zedong's Red Book, and a book, the second most read book in Catholicism, by a German monk, Thomas à Kempis, called Imitations of Christ. And those 3 books I kept with me all the time, no matter where I went. And so, fast forwarding back up to 1977, I'm in a hotel room. The party is over. Beer cans, wine, bottles everywhere. Roaches, or not the other kind of roaches, you know, not the bugs, but small portions of marijuana cigarettes, more commonly referred to as roaches. We're lying all around. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But they were laying all around, no residues of blow, you know, everything out there and something like that. And I felt this real bad period of depression. I went into the bathroom, and like that song, The Man in the Mirror, I looked in the mirror, and I could not really see myself. When I say I could not see myself, I could not see the 5-year-old boy in 1955 who wanted to do so much for justice, who wanted to change the world. I could not see the values that my grandparents and my parents had given me as God-fearing Christians. The respect for honesty, integrity, the respect for women, all those things that were ingrained in me as a young person. And, you know, I could not see, they had all just disappeared. And I realized with the disappearance of these values, with the disappearance of these things that were so fundamental to the core of my existence, I realized that indeed I was lost. It was like when you fly on a plane. When you first take off, you can see the tarmac, you see the actual line, and as the plane goes, you can see the lines, and they move faster and faster, and yet as you begin to ascend, you can still see the ground, and as you get higher, the ground becomes less visible, and as you get higher, the ground becomes less visible, and as you get higher, the ground is virtually not visible. I hope you're getting this metaphor. And as you get higher, finally you're so high, you can't see anything. You're in the clouds. And indeed, that's where I had been. I was on cloud 9, but I was not doing fine. And I realized that I was a wreck, a mess. And I'm not ashamed to say that I had what one would refer to as an epiphany, or as Dr. Field would say, an intervention.